G'day, Fools. I'm Scott Phillips, the Motley Fool's Chief Investment Officer here in Australia, and I'm super excited to bring you the second in our very brand new series. We promised you a new series on the YouTube channel, and here it is. We're calling it Stocks in Focus. This is the second one. We did one last week. If you haven't seen it yet, Google Stocks in Focus CBA. Ed Vesely did CBA with me and did a really good job of it. I am sure our next cab off the rank, Andrew Legget, analyst extraordinaire, portfolio manager, service lead, is going to do I would say even better job because that'd be unfair, an equally great job with a company you've heard of called CSL. G'day, Andrew. How are you?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing well. What about yourself?
Mate, I'm excellent. I'm very excited. I'm just stoked with some of this new YouTube stuff we're bringing people for free, by the way. So if you're enjoying it, make sure you do like it, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to make sure you are advised as soon as great content like this is going to be, I'm absolutely sure, hits the YouTube airwaves. How old am I calling the airwaves? Andrew, let's talk about CSL a little bit. This is one of maybe the poster child for Australian biotech, Australian innovation. Maybe you could add Cochlear to that, some others. But CSL, the old Commonwealth Serum Laboratory, spun out of a government institution, listed on the stock market, has done extraordinarily well to be one of, if not the world leader in things like vaccines and blood plasma products, as well as a whole lot of other stuff. It is the biotech success story we all kind of hang our hat on. We're always looking for the next CSL. You know, a business has done well when you're looking for the next of something, right? If you want the next Afterpay or the next CSL or the next whatever you want to call it, then it's a sign that you've become the benchmark. And CSL is definitely that. It is, by the way, also one of the more expensive companies on the market, not by any value metric, just literally in terms of its market cap. I don't know how big it is, maybe one of our top 5 or 6, I guess. I'm not sure if you know the answer to that. It is one that also plenty of people own. And that's part of what we're doing here with Stocks in Focus. We are trying to find the companies that you likely own, that we can tell you, give you our views on, to help educate and inform you about the investment merits of investments in these sorts of companies. So, mate, CSL, the last 12 or 18 months, there's been some stuff about viruses around. I don't know if you've caught up with the news, but apparently viruses are all the rage, and virus treatments, antivirals, vaccines, immunization. It's been all, well, most people want to talk about that in lockdowns. As we record this, unfortunately, we're in the middle of one again. But, mate, CSL, as I said, was the flavor of the month, year, week last year. This year, probably so far the same sort of thing going on. What's the latest news out of CSL?
Yeah, so it is actually like a really interesting time to talk about CSL because here we are in the middle of a pandemic. I'm under lockdown. I think you're just a little bit outside the lockdown area, so you have a little bit more freedom than I do at the moment.
Yeah,
So
sorry, mate.
it's a really timely time to speak about CSL. So the funny thing is, with CSL, here we are in the middle of a pandemic and everyone is talking about vaccines. CSL is part of that story. In fact, it is the company that is helping manufacture all the AstraZeneca vaccines that we aren't getting from Europe here in Australia. So that's kind of where everyone thinks of. If you were to pull someone on side on the random street and say, hey, have you heard of CSL? And they said, yes, it would probably be because of the vaccine. But the truth is, that's the tiny bit of the business. So what CSL does and what it makes far more money on is these blood plasma products. It's why I sometimes jokingly refer to CSL as like, you know, the company Dracula would have started if he was an entrepreneur. Because, you know, so 85% of its revenue and most of its profit comes from this business that is manufacturing, what's the term, recombinant therapies, which is basically therapies that relate to donating organic or genetic material, in CSL's case, blood plasma, for a range of therapies relating to, and I'm not going to go into specifics of the actual things because a lot of them are words I just can't pronounce, but immunology, hematology, respiratory, and other areas. So that's kind of its main business. And in order to do this, it requires this army of blood donation centers. It's got over 300 in US, Europe, and China, where people will come donate their blood, and then CSL will use that blood to extract the plasma to help create these products. In a way, CSL is almost like a mining or farming business because it sounds a bit,
No,
weird to be saying that,
that's
but
right.
it's true because
That's
it
right.
requires to, in the
Yeah,
most
yeah,
efficient way possible, get
yeah,
blood and turn that into
yep,
products. So blood
yep.
is the raw material that it uses. Um, Now, this is a really strong business because
Mm,
that scale that they've got, those 300 centers across US, Europe, and China, you know, it's not, you can't just manufacture synthetic blood. Maybe you can in the future.
right, right.
Maybe you can, but you can't do that right now. So you need,
Mm, mm.
it's not easy for a new competitor to just come in and say, hey, we're going to start making this up with, and we'll get onto the vaccine business.
Yeah, right,
But
of
that's a
course.
little bit different in that way. So
Mm,
that blood plasma product, that blood plasma division is really
mm,
the workhorse behind CSL. Uh, so that's something I thought I'd raise because when you speak to
mm, mm.
CSL people about CSL right now, they're probably going to be talking about vaccines and AstraZeneca and things like that.
Yeah,
But
you're
that's
right.
only
Yeah,
15% of
yeah,
the revenue. It's a tiny
yeah.
bit. To its credit, that vaccine business has been growing faster than the larger business. So that is,
Mm, mm,
a business that CSL can hang its hat, well, hoping to hang its hat on, will grow into a much bigger place in the future. And it has. I say it's
mm, mm,
15%
mm,
now. 5 years ago, it was much less. About 90% of the revenue, if not more, was coming from
mm, mm.
that blood plasma division. So that's kind of the snapshot of CSL. Now, we look at what's been going on for that during COVID. Obviously, vaccine demand is probably higher than it's ever been in its life for something.
Yeah.
CSL is more known for the influenza virus, but as a vaccine
Mhm.
manufacturer, they have that expertise to create certain types of vaccines, of which AstraZeneca fit nicely into that little world. Um, but in regards to blood donation as well, that keeps going. They have seen a drop off in new
Mm,
blood donations. So their regulars are coming in. That they're not getting as many new new donations or new people donating
mm, mm,
because
mm.
more people are staying at home under lockdown. Um, you know, when you're in a pandemic, you tend not to want to go outside.
Yeah.
You keep that to a minimum. And I'm not sure if
It's a good reminder,
getting a
though,
needle
right? If
put
you
in
if
your
you if
arm.
you if you want to get out of the house, one of the great things you can do is get out of the house and give blood. So maybe a
Yeah,
quick ad for the Red Cross and others while we're here. Tempting not to go outside or forget about it, but those blood products are still needed, right? People are still having treatments in hospitals. Not about CSL necessarily at all, but a good reminder, as you say, that if you are someone who can or does normally give blood, please do yourself a favor, do community a favor, duck out and do that. You were doing some good and getting getting some fresh air as well, so that can't be bad. Sorry, mate, it just interrupted, but I thought it
no,
was worth a point worth making.
no, that's fine. So that is story. Like, in a pandemic, people don't want to go outside unless it's needed. And for a lot of
Yeah,
people, especially people that haven't been doing it and CSL does pay people for these blood donations.
right.
Uh, going outside in a pandemic, getting a needle put in your arm and donating a pint of blood is not necessarily high up on people's agendas. So that's just the fact of what's going on with the business right now. So what? So they have talked about increasing the amount of money that they pay, particularly for new donations. Kind of like, in order to retailers to get people through the door, they'll discount prices. CSL is now offering more money for new people to come in, kind of that
Right.
added acquisition cost to try and make it more attractive. And they've even talked about reaching out to social media influencers to try and get them to encourage people to come in and do it because obviously, I said they need this blood in order to create their products. That is, you know, plays an important part in a lot of people's everyday kind of lives regarding their health. So they need that supply to be not only ongoing, but if they're going to grow, they need it to get higher as well. So it's an interesting time for CSL. It's
Yeah,
in
right.
at just looking at it for, in what's going on at the moment with COVID, you would think that it's a business that should be doing really well, but
Mm.
they are having they are facing some issues there.
Mate, is it too harsh to say this might be the first time social media influencers have actually done something of value? Would that be would that be too harsh? Probably a little bit too harsh. Not much else
It
though, really.
depends how you define value. There's a lot of businesses that probably think social media influencers are providing a lot of value at the moment.
Well, let's say what value to the wider society, the wider community. Let's put it that way. All right, I'll move away
Yeah,
from
exactly.
that. Mate, that's the CSL story, and it's a good point that blood plasma is the largest business by a very very large margin. Immunisations improving. Of course, there are issues with a question about efficacy of certain vaccines for certain age groups. I don't want to get into that at all, other than to say to people, go out and get vaccinated if you possibly can. The medical advice is very very clear, but I won't editorialise any further. Mate, let's get back to the CSL investment story. I'm going to ask you to juxtapose the bull and the bear positions, the case for investing in CSL, and then the case for not investing in CSL. Let's start with the bull case. Let's start with the pro, the for. Give me a thumbnail sketch. What if you're going to make the case of saying you should invest in CSL because? What are some of the reasons why an investment in CSL is a great idea right now?
Okay, so CSL, undoubtedly one of Australia's highest quality businesses right now. And that is how it became. It wasn't that long ago. It was the largest company on the ASX.
Right.
And it's got that. It's a global business, which is something that you can't say for every Australian business. It has really
Yes.
strong positions in its market. So, I'm talking about those blood plasma products, which make up 85% of the revenue and almost all its profit at the moment. They have a really strong position in that market, and they have a scale there that gives them a big competitive advantage, which is what you want to see. It is very hard for a new player to just from scratch build up a company that is going to be able to rival
Yes.
CSL in that regard. So
Yeah, right.
barriers to competition is something that you want to see in companies, and that especially companies that tend to do well on the stock exchange. Now, in regards to its vaccine business, it is one of the leading providers of influenza vaccines, something that most of us have every single year. And it is, like I said, it is one of the leaders there. So from a quality perspective, CSL has everything that you would desire, and it has a long track record of success. And now we get into the R&D, which is something I haven't spoken about yet. They spend about 10% of revenue on R&D every year, and for a company of CSL size, that's a considerable amount of money. That R&D is the future growth pipeline. If that R&D pays off, then CSL has a whole new growth path to take advantage of, from new products and entrenching its quality and competitive advantage and space in the market even further. So that would be the executive summary of the CSL buy case. It's a great company. It's likely to remain great because of its various barriers, and therefore it's one that you would be comfortable holding for the long term.
Yeah. Research development in particular, mate, strikes me as one of those things that is its own scale benefit. We think about scale benefits, we think of cost benefits, we think of reach, we think of brand benefits. Those are all real scale benefits. But if you're in the tech and particularly biotech space, the sheer amount of cash you can bring to bear to try and find the next big thing, it's going to be, it's probably not outside the pharma companies. I don't imagine there's a company in the world that spends more money on biotech R&D in the same way, in the same sector anyway, that CSL does. Just a phenomenally large chunk of change specifically aimed at finding new blood plasma products, new solutions, new hopefully final solutions for solving some of these medical issues that can be hopefully fixed once and for all, or treated in a much, much better way. So really, really important technology and really, really important efforts. Let's turn the tables on that. So you've painted a picture of a high quality, global, defensive business with a great brand, great products, great R&D pipeline. So why wouldn't you invest in CSL despite all that stuff? What would the bear case be for not investing in CSL?
Okay, so now I'm turning into the bear. Okay, so what I will point out is we've talked about vaccines a lot. Now, one area that CSL does seem to be behind the eight ball with, and lagging a little bit behind, is mRNA vaccines, which is something that the vast majority of the world had never heard of, just over a year ago, but is now something that is firmly entrenched in most people's minds, and you can't go a day without reading it. So CSL currently doesn't have any mRNA capability. They are, as part of that R&D program, they are looking into it for an influenza vaccine, but it's at the very early stages. Now, what we have seen during COVID is this mRNA vaccine become showing more efficacy, at least in relation to COVID. And in a lot of countries, it tends to be the preferred option. And obviously, we've talked about vaccines, talked about AstraZeneca. There has been some headlines with AstraZeneca. I'm not going to get into. I have an AstraZeneca vaccine, so I'm obviously not getting caught up in the whole story about blood clots and all of that, because it's just a minute kind of percentage, as unfortunate it is for those that have actually had the misfortune of getting that. But mRNA vaccines have a lot of advantages too. So not only are they showing more efficacy, but it makes far less time. It takes far less time to create an mRNA vaccine and adjust it for whatever the latest important strain is than what the traditional viruses that CSL are known for. Because I've heard people refer to mRNA vaccines as like programming in a way. You just once you have the genetic code, you can just put that in, create the protein, and then you're ready to go. And I think it takes about 3 months, whereas traditional vaccines are a lot longer than that. So mRNA vaccines are showing a lot of advantages over the traditional kind. And because of COVID, we now have our first use case of mRNA vaccines. Now that's opened the door for companies like Pfizer and Moderna, who now, because of COVID, probably are leading the pack in that regard. And in regards to Moderna too, like 3 years ago, that was a tiny company by big global standards. It was a $6 billion business. Now it's a $125 billion business because it was successful in being one of the pioneers of this mRNA vaccines for COVID. And they are now looking at other areas. A big focus for them is now influenza. So they are now looking to take the fight to CSL. And they have arguably an advantage in that mRNA sector. And they're even also planning or looking into a vaccine that combines the flu shot, influenza, with COVID, which, when you think about it, just makes sense. Why have multiple when you can have one? So we're seeing competition ramp up in the vaccine space much more significantly than what it has in the past. And that could impact the growth of CSL's vaccine business, which, as I said, has been the one that has been growing faster than the overall blood plasma division on a revenue basis. So that's one area that, I look at and see some concern there. Now, going further, we've talked about its blood plasma business, great business, but there are increased costs there. They are seeing fewer people come through the door to donate blood, which it requires. Does this continue past COVID? I don't know. They are needing to up the rate to encourage more people, so that increased the cost of that business and lowers profitability. So there's that too. So we are seeing some challenges on a business basis for CSL. Now, next pack, we've talked about the business. Next, we talk about the valuation. And this is, I think, something, when we talk about the bear case, we can talk about the businesses, but you have the business quality and then you have the valuation, and you put them together, and that's what creates an investment proposition. And in regards to CSL's case, let me bring up my notes for a second. It's not a cheap company. We've talked about how much it is a high quality business, but it is being valued like a high quality business as well. So based on, and I don't like getting, too into the jargon area of the investment world, but the PE multiple, something that a lot of people use to, come up with a level of value for a business. For CSL is around 45 times 2020 earnings. So
So
That
price is 45 times the company's earnings, expressed as a
yes,
ratio. Market
yeah,
average is probably about 16 or 18. And for a high quality business, you might pay a high quality standard business 20, 25 times. Maybe for an extremely great business, you might pay 40, 50 times. But as you say,
yeah,
we're getting towards the top of that range, right?
yeah, definitely. So what that means is that CSL needs to continue growing for a long time yet, and not
Mm.
just growing. It has to have good growth, like strong
Yeah.
growth. And that's something, I know they're not kind of definitive terms, but
Mm, mm,
basically
mm.
you want to see at least double digit growth for a while, I'd imagine, for a
Yep.
price around 45 times. Now, looking at what other people like, we talked about Moderna, now we'll talk about Pfizer. So CSL's PE multiple is almost twice that of Pfizer, which is another
Wow.
really large, high quality pharmaceutical
Okay.
business.
Yeah. All right.
So that's, you look at that and you kind of wonder, okay, can CSL grow
Mm,
at a rate required to justify that valuation? And when you look that there are some increased competition pressure in vaccines, there are, at least temporary cost increases in its big plasma business, and then
mm.
this high multiple, that I think would be the bear case that would make people wonder, is it worth buying right now?
All right, I'm fascinated because now I'm going to get you to put those side by side. I'm not exactly sure what side you're going to come down on. The bull case was compelling. The bear case was compelling. Recency bias tells me maybe you'll be on the bear side, but if I think back to some of the positives, I can see why you might come out with a positive verdict here. So do me a favor, throw the crystal ball out in front of you. Look out 3, 5 years, hopefully longer. Our job at the Motley Fool is to beat the market. If you're not going to beat the market, buy the market, right? If you're going to underperform, you can buy the market, buy an ETF for a really cheap price. You're looking for shares you think, well, not you personally, we all think, we're all looking for shares we think are market beaters by definition. Otherwise, we might as well give up and buy the index, go fishing. So, does CSL pass the test? Is it likely, in your view, to be a market beating investment over the next 5+ years?
Okay, so when I come up to make these decisions, to borrow a legal term, I look at it on the balance of probability, which means, do I think it's most likely that it will beat the market? I think
Mm,
CSL is a great business. I think it will remain a quality business for some time to come, especially over that 3 to 5 years. But when I
mm.
take into account the valuation, I am not convinced. I'm not sure. I don't think it's highly probable, in my opinion, and I've been wrong many times, but that it will beat the market. I wouldn't be selling, but I'm not rushing to buy it either.
There you go, fools. Andrew Leggett's verdict on CSL. I hope you've enjoyed this Stock and Focus, this deep dive on the company. It's a fascinating business, and it's one of those companies, frankly, even despite how well it's going and how well known it is, we don't talk about it anywhere near enough. Some of those Australian success stories, the CSLs, the Fortescues, arguably even some of our banks and retailers, as much as they're not global stories, have done incredibly well. CSL certainly belongs to that, you know, elevated group of businesses that have taken, frankly, Australia to the world and have absolutely dominated in the process. But according to Andrew, at least, not probably likely. On the balance of probabilities, as he says, to be a market beater from here. Fools, if you've enjoyed Stocks in Focus, and I hope you have, make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like this video for me, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to make sure you get notified as soon as the next one of these, or our Stock in the Week, or our media appearances, or everything else that we have planned for YouTube over the coming days, weeks, and months. As soon as it hits YouTube, the internets, as soon as it happens, you'll be notified if you hit that notification bell on the channel. So do that for me now. Also, make sure you do check out some of the other free content from the Motley Fool. If you're not already, please subscribe to the Motley Fool Money podcast. If you're a podcast listener, jump on Apple Podcasts, download your favorite podcast app, jump on the Listener app, no matter what your operating system is. That's done by our friends at Southern Cross Austereo. We're part of that network for our Motley Fool Money podcast. So look that up. Make sure you jump on the socials too. Andrew is on Twitter at Andrew Legget. Pretty straightforward. Andrew, the way you'd expect it to be spelled, Legget. You can follow me on Twitter and Insta at TMF Scott P. You can follow the Motley Fool on Twitter and Insta at the Motley Fool AU. Jump on Facebook at I'm / Scott Phillips Money, or the Motley Fool is / the Motley Fool Australia. We are everywhere. And make sure you get plenty of free, great content. By the way, also sign up to one of our services if you like what we do. But in the meantime, at least grab some free content from us by going to any one of those places. Get the best of foolish wisdom from people like Andrew and others you have seen and will see on this channel in the weeks and months ahead. In the meantime, and until next time, Fool on.